On today's episode, I'm reacting to all the Week 7 matchups, plus all the fantasy studs for Week 7, coming right up. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast for Monday, October 26, 2020. And I'm Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So, please hit subscribe, please support the show and hit the bell so you don't never miss another episode. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about all the Week 7 matchups and all my reactions to the matchups, plus all those fantasy studs for Week 7. But first, I want to just bring up, the podcast has hit a new milestone. And as of last week, we have surpassed over 1,000 downloads. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone who has downloaded the podcast. I know it's still a new podcast. It's only 5 months old, but everyone who has been downloading and listening, I really appreciate it. And honestly, it's been amazing to kind of see the support that I've gotten, to see that I've been downloaded in 9 different countries. The continuous people that I see download the podcast, every podcast. I mean, thank you to everyone, and I hope that you find this sincerely, from the bottom of my heart. This is awesome to see that I've been downloaded on a regular basis from some of you, and I really appreciate it. And I want to be able to do this with a lot of support that I've had. I want to mention some guys that have really supported me, and some of our new supporters. And first and foremost, I want to thank Jared. Jared is one of my best friends, and he has really helped me. He's helping me build the website. He's helping me just keep me pushing through the podcast, trying to help me when I feel that it's getting a little overwhelming. He continues to push me through it, so I want to say thanks to him. And also to my fantasy football league, the GCFL. This is something that's been new to my league, because I try to keep this stuff under wraps. Sometimes when you do something, you always feel like you don't have the support of your friends, and you kind of do things under the radar. So this is something I was keeping from my friends, because sometimes you get kind of self-conscious about how you sound on radio, or you sound on a podcast, or information that you're giving. But these guys have been, ever since I told them about the podcast, and it's only been the recent of less than a week. I told them this past week, but just the support that they have given me for it. Just want to give them a shout out, because it means a lot to be able to have the support for things that you enjoy, that you're passionate about. I love talking about football. I love talking about fantasy football. It's something that I just enjoy year round. So I just want to give them a shout out, and just thank you to everyone who has supported the show. It means a lot. So thank you again, and I hope to continue to grow this podcast, continue to see the subscriber list grow. It's been awesome. So like I said, thank you so much. With that being the case, let's get into some of the injury news that took place on Sunday. So the big news is OBJ, he is out the rest of the season. He tore his left ACL. So obviously this sucks for anybody who owns OBJ in fantasy. It sucks for OBJ himself, obviously. It sucks for the Browns, because now they lose another playmaker. But with OBJ, I mean, when it comes to what to expect from him, even for in the start of next season, I think that Cleveland, that was his last game in the Cleveland Browns uniform. I think that they'll move on from him, especially coming off an ACL injury. I think that he'll be either released or traded, or whatever the case may be, to get him off the roster. But it looks like OBJ will be playing for someone else in 2021. And honestly, if he has surgery within the next few weeks, he should be good to go, based on training camp, based on his rehab and everything that takes place with the surgery and the recovery process. But he will be ready for next season. Don't really know what he'll be like when it comes to, will he have the chance to actually be in training camp, do some of the off-season workouts. But, the fact that he did it in October, he should be good to go before the season starts next season. And then staying with Cleveland, so the Browns head coach, Kevin Stefanski, had said that Nick Chubb could return after the week 9 bye. So we know that he's dealing with the MCL injury. It looks like he's getting closer to return. There hasn't been any hiccups in his recovery. So it looks like Nick Chubb should be back in the next couple of weeks. And then going to New England, Bill Belichick has reported that Cam Newton continues to be the starter for the Patriots. He was benched yesterday because of 3 interceptions, just having an awful game. So I think that when it comes to fantasy, if you're in a 2-quarterback league and you own Cam Newton, you're probably looking elsewhere because you just don't have no idea exactly how he's going to play, how this offense is going to click. I mean, there's a lot of guys on that roster right now that are on fantasy rosters that they're almost droppable. But Cam Newton is a guy that I think could turn around. But I think the safer bet is for him to be benched until you see some consistent play from him. But it looks like Bill Belichick is going to stay with Cam Newton. And honestly, Cam Newton gives them the best chance to win. So I don't see them going to Stidham or going to another quarterback. I think Cam Newton is their best chance to win. And I think now going to the San Francisco 49ers, Jeff Wilson Jr., he sustained an ankle injury yesterday. He was having a massive game for them. And he looks like he has a high ankle sprain. That's what it looks like on video. So he's going to miss a few weeks. So that means that Jerick McKinnon comes back to being the starter. But you got to think about there's JaMycal Hasty too. So that's a situation to look at in San Francisco. And then going to the Arizona Cardinals, Kenyon Drake left the game early last night due with an ankle injury. The X-rays came back negative, so that's good news. There's nothing broken, but he's having an MRI today to determine if his ankle, if he's sustained like a high ankle sprain or anything like that. But it looks like he could miss some time, so it means that Chase Edmonds would be a guy that you would look to see if he's available in your leagues. And then on the other side of the ball with the Seahawks, Chris Carson, he left the game early with a foot injury. It looks like he sustained like a mild foot sprain. The Seahawks reported it doesn't seem to be that serious, but he's having an MRI today to determine the severity of it. With that being the case, I mean, a lot of injuries, a lot of big names. It's another week that we've seen a big name go out because of injury. I just hope there's going to be 1 week out of the season that we're not going to see a big name get hurt and out for a substantial amount of time. So let's have our fingers crossed for week 8 that nobody gets injured. That's a big name, or anybody gets injured at all. And then last, if anybody saw the game against the Washington football team and the Cowboys, Andy Dalton got his head knocked off almost literally. He is dealing with a concussion. So that means that with him being in the concussion protocol, will he play in week 8? So that's another thing you got to think about if you have to pivot to somebody else. Really not sure exactly if I think that the quarterback that came in, it was, what's his name, Zunucci or Zanuccio or something like that. So he may be a guy that you may want to add if you're in a deeper league and you have Andy Dalton, you're playing a 2-quarterback league. But I think that I'm hoping that you're rostering more than 2 quarterbacks because it looks like Andy Dalton may not play just based on the hit, but he flew back with the team last night. So it seems like he will be possibly good to go on Sunday in week 8, but we'll see. But with that being the case, let's go into the top plays of the week. I love doing this at the beginning of every podcast on Monday. I like going and talk about the top plays. And generally, the top play would go to the fastest ball carrier. However, the top play of this week is going to DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, if you didn't watch the Sunday Night Football game, Russell Wilson threw an interception to Budda Baker, and it looked like it was going to be a pick 6 for the Cardinals. And all of a sudden, you see a player, Usain bolting towards Budda Baker, and it was DK Metcalf. So DK Metcalf reached a top speed of 22.64 miles per hour to catch up with Budda Baker to help avoid a touchdown. And honestly, I mean, if you are a coach of football, I think this is the tape that you need to show all of your kids because this is what effort looks like. Football is a game of inches, and this is exactly what coaches are talking about, but with effort. That play could have been a touchdown. And what happened is that DK Metcalf, because of his effort in tackling Budda Baker with, inside the 5-yard line, helped them not score a touchdown. And then the series after that, the Cardinals did not score. They went for on 4th down and got no points out of it. So that's exactly why you put your 100% effort into every single play because DK Metcalf was now showing you the definition of what can happen if you just put 100% effort on every single play. So kudos to DK Metcalf. He deserves to be the top play for this week. So moving on to the longest play of week 7. So Emmanuel Mosley, the corner for the San Francisco 49ers, he ran 129.6 yards on his 51-yard interception. So whole lot of yards for a little bit of gain, but he ran 129.6 yards. And then the improbable completion. So Joe Burrow threw the ball to A.J. Green, had a completion probability of 15.3%, and it was on his 22-yard reception. So that was the least probable percentage this week. And then when it comes to the remarkable rushes, Antonio Gibson had a 40-yard run, and on that 40-yard run, he was only expected to get 7 yards, so he was able to run 33 over expected yards, which was the biggest gain of the week, which is kind of crazy because we've seen, Miles Sanders had a 75-yard run, 2 weeks in a row. Then you saw Derrick Henry have his run last week. So it was crazy that this was the longest run of the week. And then lastly, there is the fastest sack goes Keanu Neal of the Atlanta Falcons. He sacked Matthew Stafford in 2.2 seconds. So pretty quick on the sack, which gives him the top spot for the fastest sack for the week. But now let's go into some of the reaction to the matchups. I mean, crazy day of football. A lot of lopsided wins, but a lot of great play by a lot of young guys too. But let's start off with the Sunday night football game. It was the Seahawks versus the Cardinals. The Cardinals won this game in overtime, 37-34. And this was just a back and forth game all day long. I mean, Russell Wilson continues to show why, he's on pace to right now to tie Peyton Manning's record-breaking touchdown passes for the year. He's at 22 touchdown passes, so that's a remarkable stat. However, he did have 3 interceptions last night. He had a costly one as well. So, with that being the case, I mean, that's just the game's about turnovers. So they just had too many turnovers. The Seahawks. This is the problem that the Seahawks are having. They just don't have defense, right? They don't have the roster. They only have 9 sacks on the whole entire season. They're not getting pressure on the quarterback. They're giving up so many yards in the passing game. So, this reminds me of when Peyton Manning played for the Colts on when he had such a great offense, but they had nobody on defense, and they had to score over 40 points just to win. So I think that they need to do something. I mean, they're missing Jamal Adams, so that is obviously a big hit. Shaquille Griffin went down last night with the injury. So I think at the trade deadline, they really need to figure out their defense because they definitely need the help. But, Kyler Murray had a big game last night. Kyler Murray continues to be that top 10 quarterback. He continues to put up the numbers. The guy is just a dual threat that he's just fun to watch. And I don't know if you saw that play last night that he threw a touchdown pass to DeAndre Hopkins, but this is a video that's been circulating around social media. But you see on the replay, you see Kyler Murray smirking when he was throwing the ball to DeAndre Hopkins for that touchdown, seeing that he was on one-on-one man coverage. And that's such a savage move to see someone grinning and just happy that he's seeing his best wide receiver going one-on-one and they scored a touchdown. So good for Kyler Murray having a good game. From the running back position, Russell Wilson led the Seahawks with 84 yards rushing. But the story of the game for the Seahawks was Tyler Lockett. I mean, they had no answer. The Cardinals had no answer for Tyler Lockett. I mean, he went for 15 receptions, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, I think after the first quarter that they just couldn't stop him. At some point, you just have to find ways to bump him off the line, or you have to try to double cover him because he was just destroying the Cardinals. But I understand if you have to figure out DK Metcalf too. So I understand that DK Metcalf is a fast, more physical receiver, but Tyler Lockett just ate it up yesterday, and great game by Tyler Lockett. Then going on to the Bucs versus the Raiders. The Bucs won this game 45-20. Tom Brady had a massive game. He had 369 yards passing. He had 4 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. Leonard Fournette, he led the team rush with 50 yards, but Ronald Jones did have the touchdown. And Leonard Fournette added another 6 receptions on top of that. But the leading receiver for the Bucs was Scotty Miller. He had 6 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. Tom Brady was able to throw to 4 different receivers for touchdowns. Gronk looks great. He had a touchdown. Tyler Johnson had a touchdown. Chris Godwin had a touchdown. And that throw, I don't know if you saw the replay of Scotty Miller, the throw that Tom Brady threw to Scotty Miller for that touchdown. I mean, everyone's talking about Tom Brady having losing his arm strength and his arm talent. But if you look at the throws he made yesterday, it's hard to really combat the fact that he doesn't have his arm talent anymore, because that guy was dropping dimes all day long, throwing laser beams to his receivers. I mean, I can't imagine what this team's going to look like when it comes to with Antonio Brown on it. But unfortunately, the guy who did not get any recognition was Mike Evans. I mean, he's been dealing with the ankle injury, but right now, fantasy-wise, he has been pretty much non-existent the last couple weeks. And I can't imagine that gets better with Antonio Brown coming to the team. So it looks like Antonio Brown can start practicing on Wednesday. But the fact of the matter is that I think Mike Evans he's the guy that you probably are going to try to trade away, because he's the guy that is just not getting the looks and the targets. But But when it comes to tight end, Rob Gronkowski looks like the old Gronk. He looks fast. He looks physical. He looks not exactly what he looked like when he was in New England, but it looks like he's starting to get back into football shape. And he's had 2 good games in a row. So I'm wondering if this is Gronk season and it's a good time to even add Gronk, or if you had him and kept him, you're going to benefit from that. And then moving on to the Lions versus the Falcons. I don't know what to say about this game. I mean, the Falcons just cannot get a win. They lost the Lions 23-22, and they had the game won. And unfortunately, Todd Gurley he broke out, and he was about to score a touchdown, or he broke and he was about to score. He wanted to stop at the 1 yard line, but forgot, had kind of a mental lapse, and he fell into the end zone, which gave the Lions more time on the clock to go down the field and win. And Matthew Stafford was able to hit TJ Hawkinson in the end zone for that win. But I've never seen a team with such bad. The Browns have been cursed for a very long time, and you look at what the Falcons are doing right now. I mean, they cannot just win a game, and it's always dramatic for them. But the matter is, like, this game, Matthew Stafford had a decent game in the sense of, like, fantasy wise. He didn't have a big game. He kind of average game. Todd Gurley had a good game. He had another 2 touchdowns. Kenny Galladay had a good game. You had a good game from Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. Even Hayden Hurst had a good game, even though, like, the Detroit Lions are pretty good against the tight end position. But overall, I mean, just a weird ending to that game to see that even when they scored a touchdown, they can't win, and their defense couldn't stop anybody. So good fight from the Lions yesterday. And when now we're going to the Browns and the Bengals. The Browns won this game 37-34. I mean, Joe Burrow continues to look for real. I mean, he threw for 406 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had another 2 turnovers, though. But the crazy thing about Joe Burrow, out of the 7 games, 5 out of the 7 games, he's thrown for over 300 yards. So he's definitely having a good season for a rookie quarterback. I think that, he shredded them the first meeting. He did it again yesterday. But Joe Burrow continues to look pretty good. And then even Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield started this game awful, but he ended up throwing 5 touchdown passes. So a good game from Baker Mayfield from a fantasy standpoint. More than likely he was on your bench, which sucks. But it is what it is. You weren't expecting him to do that, but it happened. Kareem Hunt, quiet game, only 76 yards on the ground. Now, when it comes to Cleveland, their pass catchers, they lost OBJ. So Rashard Higgins is the guy that kind of benefited from that. He went 6 for 110. Harrison Bryant was the tight end that actually, started over David Njoku. He had 2 touchdowns. David Njoku had a touchdown. Donovan Peoples, he had a touchdown as well. So I'm wondering how this team's going to look with OBJ off the field, on how Jarvis Landry, if his fantasy stock goes up, or if there's someone else that actually steps up to the plate. But a fun game to watch. It sucks that the Bengals lost, but overall it was a fun game to watch. Now going to the Steelers and the Titans. The Steelers won this game 27-24. Another missed field goal by the Titans kicker. But overall, good game. Big Ben, he didn't have a good game. I mean, he had a decent fantasy game, but he had 2 touchdowns, had another 2 interceptions. Ryan Tannehill had a quiet game, yesterday. James Conner, he led with the rushing with 82 yards. Derrick Henry did have the touchdown. A.J. Brown for the Titans, he went 6 for 153 and 1. He had a long touchdown reception. But the story of this game does come down to Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool at the last 2 weeks has been the fantasy darling. He was added in a lot of leagues. He's about 90% owned in leagues. And Deontay Johnson came back. Deontay Johnson and Juju were the target leaders for this game. Juju had 14 targets, and Deontay Johnson had 15 targets, and Chase Claypool had 1. So Deontay Johnson did go out later in that game with an injury, but it seems like he should be okay for week 8. But now this is a concern that we have about Chase Claypool. He was a guy that was added in most of leagues. He was played in most of the leagues yesterday, and he got you in a PPR league 0.8 points. So I played him in my main league. I was disappointed in that. However, it didn't hurt me this week. But when it comes to going forward, how is that going to look, with Chase Claypool's fantasy value going forward, which we'll see. But just a very interesting game from him. And then going on to the Panthers versus the Saints. The Saints won this game 27-24. Drew Brees had a good game. He had 287 yards and 2 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Alvin Kamara continues to have over 100 yards, total yards. He didn't score yesterday, but he continues to be the guy that has a safe floor in PPR. He's not having the monster weeks he had in the beginning of the season, but he's a guy that is definitely going to still beat Alvin Kamara. But you had, DJ Moore had a great game. He had a long touchdown pass. You had Robbie Anderson. He had, 6 receptions for 74 yards. The story with the Saints, though, because Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders was out, yesterday. So everyone's like, okay, Traquan Smith should be the guy who leads in targets, in receptions for the Saints. But of course, Marquez Callaway is the guy that was the guy who got the 10 targets. He had 10 targets, had 8 receptions for 75 yards. So this is so hard about when Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are out. It's hard to figure out what Saints who on the Saints is going to be the guy who gets the targets. And everyone's thinking Traquan Smith. I mean, Traquan Smith had 4 receptions. He had 54 yards, but still, just not a good game, overall if you played Traquan Smith. And then Mike Davis for the Panthers, he only had 7 rushes for 12 yards. Just a very, very quiet game from him from a fantasy standpoint. Christian McCaffrey should be back by week 9, so that's going to be a very big boost for that offense. But overall, I mean, Jared Cook had another touchdown. He had a touchdown yesterday as well, so not bad from him. And then moving on to the Bills versus the Jets. I mean, this was an ugly game overall. I mean, Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts again yesterday. He had 1 fantasy point. The Bills won this game 18-10. Josh Allen, quiet game from him. He had 307 yards, but no touchdowns. He had another 61 yards rushing, but overall, just not a fantasy-wise. I mean, Cole Beasley, he was a guy that if you played him, good for you because he had 11 receptions for 112 yards. So this is probably the only really big fantasy, thing to talk about is Cole Beasley. But, on the Jets, though, you had Denzel Mims back and you had Brashad Perriman back. So these are 2 guys that you kind of want to keep your eye on when it comes to waiver wire claims because, yes, they do play for the Jets, but I'm wondering how much better they'll get once they get a little more time with Sam Darnold and later on through the season. I'm not saying they're must-adds, but just 2 names to kind of keep your eye on just in case they start popping off at some point. Now going on to the Dallas Cowboys versus the Washington football team. The Washington football team won this game 25-3, and I mean this was an ugly game for the Dallas Cowboys. They definitely are on the decline. I mean, now people are realizing how much Dak Prescott meant to this team and how much he meant to this offense because if you own Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz, Zeke, you're concerned now about their upside in fantasy because I know for me, I own CeeDee Lamb. I didn't play him yesterday, but I played Chase Claypool, so it wasn't really it was a wash pretty much in the sense of what I got fantasy-wise, but that's concerning on how it was pretty much like CeeDee Lamb and everyone else was kind of an afterthought. I mean, Washington does have a good defense, so I'll credit that they have a good defense. But the fact of the matter is that, one play that just continues to get played over social media and over all the sports channel is that Andy Dalton, the Cowboys were backed up into their own end zone, and Andy Dalton ran to try to get some yardage. He gives himself up, and then John Bostic, the linebacker for Washington, hit him high, hit him in the head, and concussed him. And I didn't really think about this until I was watching more of the sports channels. Not one player confronted Bostic and got in a fight trying to defend Andy Dalton. And that's super concerning based on there's been rumblings going on in the last 2 weeks about there's some internal issues with Dallas, with the coaching staff. And yesterday was obviously a depiction of what is going on in that locker room because not one person defended Andy Dalton. And honestly, when it comes to the quarterback situation and when it comes to fantasy value, I think you have to bench. I mean, if you have Amari Cooper and Zeke, you have to play them, obviously. But when it comes to like Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, these are guys that you just can't trust because who's going to play quarterback? I mean, their backup quarterback is DiNucci, and he went 2 for 3 for 39 yards. And this is where I'm wondering if the Cowboys are going to actually trade for a quarterback. Are they going to maybe trade for Ryan Fitzpatrick? I brought him up last week in the podcast. Are they going to bring up, will they trade for maybe Tyrod Taylor? Because Justin Herbert obviously is going to be the answer in LA. Or, I know this is kind of probably not a good take, but what if they bring in Colin Kaepernick? Like, Colin Kaepernick, I guarantee is better than Ben DiNucci. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand it's halfway through the season, And I understand there's controversy with bringing in, Colin Kaepernick, but like when you're talking about talent, I mean, you're telling me that Colin Kaepernick is not talented enough to actually help this team? I mean, it's a short-term rental, right? It will make sense, but they need to find a better option at quarterback because Andy Dalton right now, if he can't play and if he's not the answer, I can't imagine that Jerry Jones wants to see this team only win 2 games the rest of the whole season. So we'll see what happens in Dallas, but just an overall ugly game, and it kind of showed on that Andy Dalton play how bad that locker room is based on, it seems like players are just giving up. It seems like that team's giving up, and maybe they're just gut-wrenched because they lost Dak, but still, it still sucks to see a team like that, Dallas Cowboys, because they're America's team. They're going to always be on TV, and it sucks to see a team like that just kind of go under, but hopefully they can turn it around. And then going on to the Packers versus the Texans. Packers win this game easily, 35-20. I mean, Aaron Rodgers looked like Aaron Rodgers again, but of course he looks like Aaron Rodgers when he's playing against the Texans give up the 400 total yards per game. So this is always the case with Aaron Rodgers. When he plays against tough defenses, he doesn't have the same outings. When he plays against lesser half of the defenses, he does well. So Aaron Rodgers, great fantasy day. Jamal Williams had a great fantasy day, with Aaron Jones being out. Devontae Adams had a big game, 13 receptions for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't get it. All they had to do, the Texans, was guard Devontae Adams, and they just torched. They continued to torch the Texans, and I just like the same thing with the Cardinals. But I understand why the Cardinals did it, because if they went to DK Metcalf, then Tyler Lockett was going to screw him over. If they tried to double Tyler Lockett, then DK Metcalf would have screwed him over. So I get that, but Devontae Adams was like the only guy that was scary enough to score points, and they continued just to play the same game. You would think that they would try to do something to figure out, okay, let's stop Devontae Adams, but it didn't happen. He had a great fantasy game. Deshaun Watson, he had 309 yards and 2 touchdowns, so not a bad game for Deshaun Watson. Going on to the Chiefs versus the Broncos. Chiefs won this game easily, 43-16. Drew Lock, bad game, 254 yards and 2 interceptions. Patrick Mahomes, he didn't have a good fantasy game, didn't really need it. The Kansas City Chiefs scored on offense, scored on special teams, scored on defense. So when all that stuff is taking place, you don't need Patrick Mahomes to have a big game. But it was one of those games where it was just kind of like the Steelers game last week. The defense and special teams were making the plays for you, so the offense didn't have to. And it was snowing yesterday, so but you had Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a touchdown, Tyreek Hill had a touchdown. Quiet game from Travis Kelce, but overall, the Chiefs dominated that game. And going on to the 49ers versus the Patriots. I mean, this was an ugly game. I mean, the 49ers just ran the ball down the Patriots' throats. Jeff Wilson Jr. had 3 touchdowns. Big game from him. Jimmy Garoppolo, quiet game. He had 277 yards and 2 interceptions. But when it comes to this whole game as a whole, Cam Newton, man, I know he got benched, but he threw 3 interceptions. But I just wonder, his arm didn't look the same. I'm wondering if he's still having some effects from COVID, which I don't think he would, but he was asymptomatic. But it seems like they're just not clicking. James White only had 10 snaps. And when it comes to this game, when it comes to the backfield for the 49ers, everyone's big on Jerick McKinnon, but he only played 12 snaps. So Jeff Wilson Jr. is the guy to probably own, but now he's injured. So what does that look like for JaMycal Hasty? So he may be a guy to be adding in fantasy when it comes to the waiver wire, just based on just process of elimination on who's healthy. But Deebo Samuel, he went out that game with a hamstring injury. So Brandon Ayuk was the guy who led and received with 6 receptions for 115 yards. And I'm just wondering when it comes to the Patriots, what they're going to do. They said they're going to continue to start Cam Newton, which is fine. But I wonder what that means for everyone else, like Julian Edelman. What does that look like for James White, Damian Harris? It just seems like this offense just is kind of stale right now. I hope they're able to turn it around. They do have the coaching staff to be able to do that, but it's one of those things. The Patriots are on an off season based on moving off from Brady, and then you're looking at a lot of their players dropped out because of COVID. So this is an off season, but I think the question remains, how does this, when you look at what Tom Brady brought to that team and what Bill Belichick brought the team as a coach, and you wonder, everyone's well, is Tom Brady a systems quarterback? But if you look at what Tom Brady is doing right now in Tampa, it looks like that Tom Brady obviously he's not a system quarterback, but he's just like Peyton Manning in the sense of everyone talked about Peyton Manning being a system quarterback when it comes to He played for the Colts for so long. Can he do this? Have the same success in Denver? And we saw that he did. Other than that last season that Peyton Manning's arm was just a noodle, he couldn't do anything. But great players are able to go to different teams and play well. And everyone has this debate. Was it Brady that made Belichick or Belichick that made Brady? Well, if you're looking at right now, it looks like it was all Brady, because Brady's going in Tampa and just, right now he has like 17 or 18 passing touchdowns. So he's definitely lighting up. He has the weapons. But if you look at what's going on the offense, the Patriots, so Tom Brady yesterday had 4 passing touchdowns, right? The New England Patriots have 3 total passing touchdowns. So they're definitely lacking, and the Cam Newton's not giving them what they need. So I hope that Cam Newton is definitely talented enough. So I hope that Cam Newton is able to turn around. But just a very interesting conversation on, is the chicken or egg? Who made the team? Was it Belichick? Was it Brady? But right now it looks like Brady's winning that battle right now. And then going on to the Jags versus the Chargers. Chargers won this game 39-29. It was a fun game to watch if you were watching it on TV. I mean, Justin Herbert, I can see why the Anthony Lynn decided to go with Justin Herbert, but I'm not sure why he didn't go with him from the initial start, because this guy looks for real. He threw for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. He looks like a star. He's throwing the ball well. I mean, he has very good accuracy. So, I don't know. This was a big game from Justin Herbert. James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars, big game from him. Had 22 carries for 119 yards and a touchdown. He had a receiving touchdown. And the fun fact about James Robinson is that he is right now in PPR formats. He is just behind Alvin Kamara. He's the number 2 running back right now in PPR formats. So James Robinson, he may have some dud games here and there, but overall, he's been lighting it up. And I don't think people realize that he's having a very good season. So if you own James Robinson, you're definitely not disappointed. And then Keenan Allen, he had a good game. 10 receptions for 125 yards. That's a good game from him. He didn't score, but you can't get mad at the final stat line for that. And then when it comes to Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, he led the snaps this week. Justin Jackson was dealing with the injury. Joshua Kelly got the majority of the carries. He didn't really do much with that. He only had 12 carries for 29 yards. So not a very good fancy outing from him. But overall, I mean, the story of this game was Justin Herbert. I mean, this dude is just lighting up ever since he took over for Tyrod Taylor. So good game from him. Now moving on to the studs of the week. Starting at the quarterback position, Tom Brady led all quarterbacks with 45.73 fantasy points. Kyler Murray was second with 44.4. You had Justin Herbert at 44.29. And then I'm adding Joe Burrow to this at 40.27 because these were the 4 quarterbacks that had 40-point games. I'm not sure when the last time we saw 4 quarterbacks have 40-point games, but 2 rookies had 40-point games and 2 vets had, 40-point games. So big game for quarterbacks this week. And at running back, Jeff Wilson Jr. led the running backs with 32 PPR points. James Robinson was second with 31.7. Then Alvin Kamara was third with 22.8. The top wide receiver for week 7 was Tyler Lockett. He had 53 fantasy points. Just a massive game from Tyler Lockett. Devontae Adams was 44.6. And the funny thing about these 2 guys, there's a guy in my league who owns both these guys and played both these guys. And safe to say, he won this game pretty easily. And then Deontay Johnson was third with 29 PPR points. So Deontay Johnson, he's the guy that Big Ben goes to. And Chase Claypool seems like an afterthought, but don't drop Chase Claypool just yet. Kind of see how that plays out. And then at tight end, Harrison Bryant led all tight ends with 21.6 PPR points. At the beginning of the game, it was reported that he was going to start over David Njoku. Obviously, it was a great matchup against the Bengals. Austin Hooper was the guy that should have had that game, but he had that surgery he had that took him out of this game and probably for next week as well. But if you need a tight end this week, maybe Harrison Bryant is the guy that you add. Hopefully, it's someone that could give you a filler for a week until your tight end comes off a bye or injury or whatnot. And then Gronk, he had 17.2 PPR points. This is the second week in a row that Gronk's had good games. I feel like this is starting to become the Gronk and Brady show that we saw at New England. So it's going to be interesting to see when they bring Antonio Brown in. But Gronk starting to look like Gronk. And then Darren Waller, he was the third best tight end of this week with 17 PPR points. So those are the studs of the week. So this, tonight we have the Rams versus the Bears. what do you guys need to win your fantasy league this week? Is your game already over? Is it, still pending based on, do you have David Montgomery? Do you have any other players that are playing this week? But leave a comment below. Let me know what you need to win this week. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. On tomorrow's episode, I'm going over all the top waiver wire pickups for week 8. So hit subscribe so you don't miss that episode. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us over on Facebook and Twitter at The Gridiron Pod. We're on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Take care.